Okay, so this is practice test 54, game 3. So we have a cake has exactly 6 layers. We have L, M, O, R, S, and V. There's exactly one bottom layer, the first layer, and each succeeding layer from 2nd through 6th completely covers the layer beneath it. So basically what I'm getting from this is it would, if number 1 is the bottom layer, my very base layer, and then 6 through the 6 is kind of like ascending up, I'm actually going to set up my diagram like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because that's kind of mushed together, but because it's kind of how it's talking about in the setup, the scenario gives us. Because what I'm imagining, and I haven't looked at the rules yet, what I'm guessing the rules are going to start doing is saying S is above the V, or R has to be 2 layers above O or below O or something like that. And it's easier for our minds to grasp that when we're looking at it vertically, because up and down, that's how we think about it. You can do it horizontally. I think it would just be a little bit more difficult. And I think it would make the rules a little more harder to kind of like naturally understand them. I think going vertical with this one makes a little more sense because we're talking about up and down and beneath and below and stuff like that. So I'm going to go up and down for this one. So our first rule says the raspberry layer is neither immediately above nor immediately below the strawberry layer. So first thing I want to say is I was correct. They're talking about above and below and stuff like that. So when I'm looking at my diagram, I don't have to, if I'm doing vertically, I don't have to remember which one's the top, which one's the bottom. When I have it vertically, I know that the bottom's the bottom, the top's the top. So when it's telling me number 1 is saying that R is neither above nor below, immediately above or immediately below the strawberry layer, that means that they hate each other. They can't touch. We can't mix strawberry and raspberry is basically what they're saying. So I'm going to do something like this: R and V and R. You could like do your flip-flop to notate that they can go back and forth, but I'm going to be a little more diagram friendly and write it out both ways. So I can't have either one looking like that. As far as making worlds off of that number 1, I really can't do anything because for all I know, R could be at the very top, V could be at the very bottom. And that's totally fine. I just can't have them touching. So not a really good rule to start with. But let's look at the second rule. Our second rule says M is immediately above the lemon layer. So again, immediately above means that it has to be the next one on top. So if I'm doing it in a vertical fashion, M has to be immediately above L. And I'm going to block it in to know that they can't be pulled apart. It's not that M is sometime above the lemon layer. It's they are touching each other. And that's going to remind me that I can't pull them apart. Nothing can go in between there. As far as making worlds for that one, I could make a couple of worlds. And in fact, I usually like starting off with like block rules like this, but there's only one more rule left. And I can think about where to put M. I'm going to actually spread this out. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I can think about where I can put that block. So if I am visualing, I can move it here. I can move it here, 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 here. There's still a lot of different places it could go in. So I'm just going to see if that third rule has anything a little bit more restrictive. Then maybe I can start with rule 3 rather than rule 2. So rule 3 says the orange layer is above, or O is above O, but below the strawberry layer. So this is kind of like a 2-part rule. It's talking about where O is, and it's giving you 2 senses of direction. So we're going to kind of break it up. So the first part says that O is above M. Notice how the language is different than the second rule and the first rule. Second and first rule talk about immediately above, but this third rule doesn't say anything about immediately above. So it could be immediately above M, but it could also be 3 spaces above M. We can pull that chain, basically. We can stretch it out. It's not telling me that they have to be blocked in together. So if O is above M at some point, the next part of the rule says but O is also below the strawberry layer. So I'm going to do strawberry, O is below it. Now I'm going to start combining rules together. I'm going to combine this together to overlap my O's to create this. S is above O, which is above M. And this actually helps us out a lot. I'm glad we didn't start with the second rule because we can combine the second rule with our third rule. M and L have to touch. So now I don't have to worry about those rules anymore. We have this monster rule. And now M and L are actually a lot restricted or more restricted now than when we had it just as a singular rule. So now I'm going to look and see where I can put M and L because it's still a block. I'm going to work on this whole chain right here, but it's a good place to like kind of start with the block. So we know that we have to have at least 2 above my M and L block. So I'm just going to kind of move M and L up my ladder and see where they can go. So M and L could go at the very bottom. I want to make that more linear. 3, 2, 1. I can move it up 1, do M at 3, L at 2. I still have 2 more spots for S and O, so we're good there. And I can move it up 1 again, M at 4, L at 3, and I can't move it up anymore because this is the last spot. This is the highest that M can go is 4. 2 more have to be directly above it, and that's talking about over here. So I'm going to label this as 1, 2, and 3. So if we're talking about rule, finishing up this rule right here, I don't have to worry about M and L. We've placed M and L in all the spots that it can go in. Now I'm going to work on S and O. So S has to be not immediately above. S has to be above O. However, in this third world, S does have to be immediately above O because there's no space that I can stretch S any higher or O any lower. They have to form in this pattern. So S and O are forced to go there. And we'll talk about our first rule later in a little bit. I'm going to finish up my S and O before I go into that. So if I'm looking at my second rule, I can go either way. I can start with O or I can start with S. I'm going to start with S just because I feel like it. I'm going to do where can S go? So S can't go at 4 because I have to have O smushed between S and M. So the lowest that it could be is 5 in this world. The highest that it could be is 6. I create a new world. So I'm going to have one where S is at 5 and one where S is at 6. And when S is at 5, we know that O has to go at 4 because, again, it has to be smushed between S and M in some way. And that's the only empty spot that we have. So we can put O right there. And in my fourth world, I can have O kind of flip-flopping between 5 and 4. I'm just going to do a little notation like that just for right now because I want to look at 1 as well. Gotta get more space. I'm not used to doing vertical games like this. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna go, let's start with O since we started with S last time. We're gonna figure out where O can go. So O can go at 3 because we still have room for S. O can go at 4, still have room for S. O can go at 5, still have room for S. O can't go at 6 because we have to have something for S to go on top. So O can go in between 5, 4, and 3. So I'm going to make that happen so I don't have to think about this rule ever again. And then I can just solely focus on our last rule that we're going to deal with. So we're going to do O, O, and O. I'm going to focus on where I can place S. So in my 6th world, S is forced to go at 6 because it has to be above O. 5th world, it goes anywhere between 6 and 5. And my first world, it can go anywhere between 6 and 4. I'm just going to write those shorthand just because I want to look at R and V next. And where I place R and V, or the rule itself concerning R and V actually will force us to go into certain places. So I'm just going to kind of shorthand it for right now. So I don't have to think about that anymore. Okay. My last rule being R and V hate each other. We've got everything placed except for R and V, so this will be pretty easy. Basically, what we're going to do in our world is see, can they be split up? If they can, great, we're going to split them up. If they can't, it's a dead world. We just can't do it. So in my first world, I'm going to actually move my S out a little bit. If S can be between 4, 5, and 6, and we know R and V hate each other, we have to have S split up them, almost like a mediator, like they have to be separated by an adult, kind of. So we have to have someone separating them. And the only other player that we have is S. So S is going to have to go in 5. And R and V are going to flip-flop between 6 and 4 because we don't really care who comes first, who comes last. We just know that they can't touch each other. So that's our first world. In our second world, the job's already done for us. They're split up. Our only 2 spots left are 6 and 1. Again, we don't care who comes first, who comes last. So we're just going to split those 2 up. My third world, it's dead. The only 2 spaces we have left is 1 and 2, which is going to lead to R and V touching each other. And I'm not allowed to move what I've already placed down. So I'm not going to move my SOML, because once I start doing that, I mean, technically I've already done that. If you look at this world compared to world number 4, if I moved M and L down to allow for that splitting between R and V, I've already created that. Because I can move M and L down and R and O can still flip-flop between 4 and 5. So I'm just going to say it's a dead world. Can't do it. Now with 4, I have 2 spots left, basically. 1 is one of my spots always open. And then depending on where O goes, below or above O is going to be a spot that's open. No matter where I put R and V, it's not going to violate the game. So R and V, one of them is going to have to go in 1. And the other one is going to flip with O. So whichever one I don't pick for number 1 is going to flip-flop with O. So R could go in 5, R could go in 4, R could go in 1 in this world. We can just flip them around as we need. And number 5, same thing happens. They're already split up. We don't have to worry about them touching each other. And no matter where S goes, it doesn't change if R and V are going to touch each other. So if I put S at 5, it doesn't allow for R and V to touch each other if S was in 6 or something like that. So no matter where I flip S, I don't have to worry about it. S isn't forced to go into a certain place. So again, R and V, one of them is going to go in 3. One of them is going to flip with S. Doesn't matter which one. Technically, R can go in 6, 5, and 3. V can go in 6, 5, and 3. And then number 6, our last world, we have 2 empty spaces that are touching. So this world is dead. There's no way that I can move those variables around, or I don't have another space that I can drop them into to make sure that they're split up. So this game is fairly concise. We only really have about 4 worlds with some flips and flops. But ultimately, this is your diagram. So hopefully this makes it a little bit more easier. I would say the key thing to take away with this game is we can shift our diagrams around. So typically in an ordering game, we do a horizontal diagram. That's normally how they go. But if it makes more sense, you can shift it vertically and it can make more sense and sometimes help you kind of navigate those rules a little bit more. So it's totally fine to shift your diagrams around. It's the same thing. This is the same thing as if I had done it horizontally. It's just on a different plane. So let me know if you have any other questions. Thanks.